President Thabo Mbeki, Dr. Reuel Khoza, and Mani Mamsi Khoza. For the book cover, the publishers of the book have opted for a rather youthful and particularly handsome picture. I guess we are gathered here tonight to reflect on the reflections of the boy from Bushbuckridge. He whose books, and I'm quoting Lynette Chen, he whose books are so profound that each time you read them, you find something new, end of quote. He whom I myself call the quintessential principal of the corporate world and captain of the academia. President Thabo Mbeki says, Reuel Khoza may not have banished all unknown unknowns, but he nevertheless managed, and I quote, he managed to reclaim a little more land from an otherwise illimitable ocean of inexplicability, typical of President Mbeki. He is the board chair in whose board meetings Wendy Lucas Bull, and I quote, never felt like a white woman at the table, never felt like a white person at the table. He whose generational mission is summarized in the rhetorical question, if not now, when? And if not us, then who? His daughters describe him in the book, and I quote Nkateko, as consistent in all places and spaces, inspiring them with his, and I quote Munene, with his inherent and unparalleled ambition and drive, and teaching them to be never afraid to fail. And how could he fail when his wife Mamsi describes part of her role as that of allowing my husband to do what he can do best? Essential reflections reveal a farmer, entrepreneur, intellectual, and an attuned leader to whom, said Professor Nkondo, nothing about leadership is alien. If you let me just briefly comment on Professor Nkondo, that intellectual titan whose radiant smile shone brighter than the snow-white beard around his face. And allow me to invoke the Horatius-inspired rhetorical question of Benjamin Pogrund and Thomas Macaulay in relation to Robert Sobukwe. To every man upon this earth, death cometh soon or late. And how can a man die better than facing fearful odds for the ashes of his fathers and the temples of the gods? End of quote. And how can an intellectual of Nkondo's caliber die better than inside his library, at his desk, pen in hand, working ambidextrously on the manuscript of the South African Handbook of Agency, Freedom and Justice, while also editing up the manuscript we are launching today, Essential Reflections, Reuel Jethro, Mbhayimbhayi Khoza. Is there a legacy a man can leave to his country that is better than these selfless gifts of scholarship? Can a man bequeath his colleague and friend a greater inheritance than these essential reflections upon which we reflect further today? Those of us who contributed to both these volumes wish we knew that there would be Mushe Nkondo's last intellectual installments. Then we might have understood why he would call us in the middle of the night with a touch of impatience to remind us of missed deadlines and misaligned writing styles. From the beginning and throughout the process, Nkondo insisted that this project must not be allowed to degenerate into a biography, which he said is a genre that is obsessed with chronology and sequence of events. He was insistent that this work must give vent and voice to Khoza's essential reflections about as many subjects that are important to him as possible. And this is where the instrument and the tool of interview became handy. Interviews conducted by close associates, colleagues, and family, the people whom Professor Nkondo described as Khoza's inner circle. With the beautiful product now in our hands, even those of us who might have been skeptical about the use of interviews now realize how refreshing and how fit for purpose the Nkondo methodology was. And if the book beautifully achieved its aim of providing Khoza with the space and the place to make his essential reflections, it is thanks to the quality of interviewers carefully chosen from his inner circle. Essential Reflections is the outcome of a scholarly plan that has beautifully come together. Pity that, unlike Colonel John Hannibal Smith of the A-Team, Captain Mushenkondo is not here to issue the catchphrase, "I love it when a plan comes together." Let's take a short left and travel back in time, back to the evening of Saturday, the 31st of December, 1949, the last day of 1949, and the very last day of the 40s. On this day, in a village that hung precariously around the waistline of a hill, Mnombeleni, place of leeches in Bushbuck Ridge, the firstborn child of pious Justice Masashibona Khoza and Evelyn Sindisani Khoza, Nezita Onkwinika, was born. Part of Mnombeleni was a Nazarene mission station. Being devout members of the church, Pius and Evelyn gave their firstborn son the biblical names of the man who was the father-in-law of the biblical Moses, Reuel Jethro. This is a lot of pressure on Munene and Kateko. Where will they get a Moses to marry them? But his parents also gave him the name of his grandfather, Mbhayimbhayi. Young Reuel, his siblings and friends would run up the hill and down to the rather fierce rivulet called Tula Unziteka, probably given this name because when swollen, its waters were known to leap in the air and take a few unsuspecting people with it down the strong current. I have wondered if there's any truth in what Mark Twain is said to have said one day, that the two most important days in one's life are the day one is born and the day one finds out why. And if this is true, then for Reuel Khoza, the distance between those 2 days was rather short. Because already at primary school, he knew what he wanted to become when he grew up. He only wanted to become a school principal. Surely at that age, he did not fully understand the requirements for the job, let alone what it actually entailed. But the obsession with principalship was so deep in him, it remained with him throughout his adulthood. But how does one born into a rural family of subsistence farmers imagine himself as a principal? What types of delusions of grandeur must afflict a rural head boy in Bushbuck Ridge of the 50s and 60s for such a boy to grow up earnestly believing that he had what it takes to become a principal one day? What right has a commoner growing up sleeping on a reed mat, which his grandmother would spread upon the cow dung-coated floor at bedtime, to think that he has what it takes to become a principal. Maybe it was his hard-working father, a former private teacher turned evangelist. Maybe it was his entrepreneurial mother, daughter of number one, Zita. Maybe it was his loving grandparents, Jotam Dumbazi Khoza and Mariam Nene Khoza, where the young Reuel Khoza got his inspiration from. His grandfather, who owned half a dozen cattle, used to proudly say that he is a very rich man. He would say. Strictly speaking, this was not true. The old man was exaggerating his wealth quite a bit. But what it did was to inspire the likes of Reuel and his siblings to work hard. Maybe it was the vast and open landscapes that were characteristic of the Mpumalanga of Khoza's youth that played their role in literally broadening the life perspective of the young man, presenting him with an open-ended and limitless world where the far-off horizon was always beckoning. Because think about it, Khoza's daily routine as a young man was to wake up at dawn, and I'm quoting, check on the cattle, draw water from the neighboring fountain, and report back at sunrise, and only then could he go to school. And this is where Reuel Khoza got the courage to dream. As well as his own parents, there were his first teacher, Mrs. Shilote, and his school principals, Mr. J. Russell Saudi, as well as Mr. DZ J. Mtebule of Bankuna High School, who inspired him. I always tell people my only claim to fame is that I went to the same high school, and Tito Mboweni also went to the same high school. That's what makes me famous, by association. It was also at Bankuna High School that Dr. Khoza developed a love and appreciation for music, which has already been referred to. But maybe one of the most significant things that happened when he was in Bankuna was that one of his teachers, the mathematics teacher, Norman Shipalane, having completed a Bachelor of Arts degree at the University of the North, invited young Khoza to join his family at the graduation ceremony. And from then on, he thought, I want to grow up and become a principal, but I also want to grow up and get a degree. And he did. Get a degree of Bachelor of Arts in Psychology and the honors degree thereof at the University of the North. And he went on to Lancaster and many other places to get other degrees. As they say, the rest is history. N'wina va ka Khoza, wena n'watheledi nkata Reuel na n'wina vana nkateko na Mnene xikan'we ni vatukulu ha mi khensa eka nseketelo wa n'wina eka tata wa n'wina lowo ninginisa minkuhlu minkanyi ni swimuwu. A ndzi kanakani leswo na makwenu Mchaveleri Martin na n'wa Jackson ntombi ya ka Zita na Masaswona nuna wa kona na haha ni Katrina Saleleni na vakokwa wa n'wina hinkwavo va karhi va tiba swifuva hi tata wa n'wina se ni ya va nga kona le Khoseni. Ndzi nga si tindava, ndzi nga si bohelela fundzu ra nsomo mo ndzi ngulunguja nomu ndzi rhanga hi ku phata Reuel a kondza a phateka mi ta sami n'wi phatunula n'wina. Ndzi hla Reuel n'wana n'wa Jackson ntombi ya ka Nkwinika, nkata Pius Justice Masaswona, wa Jotam Dubazi Maganyani, wa Mbhayimbhayi, wa Ntshovankanyi, wa N'wamagenge, wa Phaphala na Khapama, wa Mukashi, wa Nguleni, wa Matsuna wa Nungu, Mbhayimbhayi, insizwa eshwabanisa amanye amadoda njengembuya, mzobi welizwe njengothingo lwenkosazana. Umathatha konke, umaphumula ngokulala, umlilo ovutha ubuhanguhangu, Khoza mabone kaMagigwana onesibindi njengontshingwayo, untshingwayo kaMahole, Khoza Nkalakatha, ingwazi eyahlula amangisi esandlwana. Dubula magazine, Mumbayi lowo Mbeya, teka ndikunyika.